U.S. acknowledges Malaysia's success in Cambodia-Thai ceasefire. ASEAN-Switzerland reaffirm rule-based system. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. Thanks for tuning in. You're watching World Today with me, Otto Othman. The United States has acknowledged Malaysia's success in facilitating the ceasefire agreement between Cambodia and Thailand, describing it as a major achievement that demonstrated the country's credibility and ASEAN's strength, said Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. Now, the Prime Minister said the matter was conveyed by President Donald Trump during a phone call on Thursday. In a Facebook post, the Premier conveyed his appreciation to the U.S. President for the role played by the United States in ensuring that the ceasefire was achieved. In the conversation, Datuk Seri Anwar also reaffirmed Malaysia's commitment as ASEAN chair to continue playing a proactive role in ensuring regional peace, particularly in the Cambodia-Thailand issue. Additionally, the Prime Minister said Malaysia looks forward to Trump's attendance at the ASEAN summit here next month, which will serve as an important platform to strengthen cooperation for regional peace, stability and prosperity. Malaysia, with the support of the United States and China, acted as mediator in brokering the peace agreement to end military conflict between Cambodia and Thailand on 28 July and at the extraordinary meeting of the General Border Committee here on 7th August to strengthen the peace deal. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister also stressed the importance of finalizing the reciprocal trade agreement between Malaysia and the United States, which is currently under negotiation. The matter was discussed during a courtesy call by the United States Trade Representative USTR, Jameson Greer. It was held in conjunction with the 57th ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting in the capital. Now, according to him, Malaysia, as a trade-driven economy with an open market, continues to maintain good relations with all trading partners to ensure sustainable domestic economic growth. ASEAN and Switzerland reaffirmed their support for a rule-based system, especially a multilateral rule-based system where the World Trade Organization, WTO, needs to play its role and wants to reform WTO. In the Investment, Trade and Industry Minister, Tengku Datuk Seri Zafrul Tengku Abdulaziz said discussions also encompassed economic collaboration between ASEAN and the European Free Trade Association, or FTA, ensuring that the 4th AEM Troika open-ended dialogue with Switzerland breakfast meeting held this morning. They also engaged in discussions regarding opportunities in green initiatives, sustainability and technologies, particularly in digital technology.
And I have to tell you, Deputy Minister, your hospitality is top-notch.
We talked about the recent signing of Malaysia EFTA, and we want to see how we can continue to improve. And we've seen a big increase in investment from Switzerland into Malaysia after the signing of that agreement, because I think that gives confidence that government to government can facilitate business.
He said this to the media after the 4th AEM Troika open-ended dialogue with Switzerland breakfast meeting. Earlier, Investment, Trade and Industry Deputy Minister Liu Chin Tong, in an open remarks, mentioned that the trade between Malaysia and Switzerland amounted to $28.33 billion, underscoring the strong demand in ASEAN for Swiss products and technologies in high-value sectors. Switzerland continues to be a significant provider of high-quality, innovation-focused investments, representing distinct opportunities in advanced manufacturing, life sciences, green technologies, and financial services. Canada is doubling down on Indo-Pacific trade diversification, placing ASEAN at the heart of its strategy. High-level engagement signals Ottawa's seriousness and long-term commitment in aligning itself with ASEAN's priority sectors, including clean energy, food security, digital economy, and artificial intelligence. Canada's Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade, Yasir Navi, said this includes efforts to include the
Well, thank you very much. As we work to conclude our ASEAN-Canada Free Trade Agreement negotiations, ideally by next year, our business and investments relationships are poised to expand even further and more quickly in support of our shared goals of trade diversification and economic growth. Economic modeling predicts that an agreement with ASEAN could increase Canada's GDP by $2.54 billion and ASEAN's GDP by $6 billion. The potential benefits are clear. So on behalf of
Navi made the remarks in his opening statement at the 14th ASEAN-Canada consultations today. He also confirmed that Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney will attend the 47th ASEAN Leaders Summit in Kuala Lumpur next month. It will mark Carney's first official visit to Asia and the fourth consecutive time a Canadian Prime Minister participates in the ASEAN Summit. India is looking to narrow its widening trade deficit with Southeast Asian nations at the 22nd ASEAN-India Economic Ministers consultations today. For the latest, we go live to Gibraltar Robert at MyTech in Kuala Lumpur. Over to you, Jay.
ASEAN has tabled a new package of goods under the ASEAN-India Trade in Goods Agreement, or ITIGA, aimed at tackling trade imbalances. So both parties today aim to speeding up the review process following India's growing deficit with ASEAN. And new opportunities are expected in key sectors such as electronics and pharmaceuticals, with both sides targeting a substantial conclusion of the review before year-end. Also, a quick recap of today's agenda here at the final day of the 57 ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting, and the day began with a breakfast dialogue with Swiss State Secretary Helen Budgliger-Artieda, and this is followed by the 14th ASEAN-Canada consultation chaired by Tengku Datuk Sri Zafrul, with Canada represented by its Parliamentary Secretary for Trade, Yasir Naqvi. And Secretary Naqvi also confirmed that Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney will attend the ASEAN Leaders Summit here in Kuala Lumpur next month, and this is his first official visit to ASEAN since taking office in March. And later in the evening, trade discussions will continue with representatives from Russia and Hong Kong. We'll continue to bring you the latest developments from MyTech at the 57 ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting. Now back to you in Angkasa Puri.
Thanks, Jay. Moving on, United States President Donald Trump said on Thursday that he had signed a proclamation allowing the death penalty to be pursued in certain Washington, D.C. prosecutions. The move would further expand the Republicans' efforts to seek the mental of law and order president and to exert power over the nation's capital, whose residents are largely Democrats.
Okay, this is the death penalty for somebody that kills people in Washington, D.C. I think it's capital. It's a very interesting capital punishment, capital city. Right? It's capital. But this is our capital city. We can't allow that to happen. People come in from Iowa to look at the Lincoln Memorial and they end up getting killed. It doesn't happen anymore. It's not going to happen. And if it does happen, it's the death penalty for the person that did it. And this goes into effect.
Trump deployed hundreds of National Guard troops and federal law enforcement officials in the nation's capital to supplement local police dealing with what he said was an unacceptable level of violent street crime. City officials, however, have rejected the claim that violent crime is rampant. Washington is a unique federal enclave established in the U.S. Constitution and falling under the jurisdiction of Congress, not belonging to any state. After Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan left the White House on Thursday, U.S. President Donald Trump said they had a great meeting. During their Oval Office talks, Trump suggested the United States could lift sanctions on Turkey and allow it to buy F-35 jets, but said he wants Ankara to stop purchasing Russian oil. Erdogan's first visit to the White House in about 6 years started off with a warm welcome from Trump. Seated side by side in the Oval Office, Trump called Erdogan a very tough man and said they remained friends while his predecessor, Joe Biden, was in office. Ankara is keen to leverage the friendly personal relationship to further national interest and take advantage of a U.S. administration eager to make deals in return for big-ticket arms and trade agreements. Still, Trump pressed Erdogan to cut off oil purchases from Russia as he tries to put pressure on Russia's sources for funding its war in Ukraine. Turkey, Hungary and Slovakia are the main European purchasers of Russian oil. Trump also said that he could lift sanctions against Turkey very soon. The Gaza Health Ministry reported that the death toll from the Israel-Hamas war has now risen to 65,344, while 166,795 others have been injured since the conflict erupted on 7th October 2023. Now, according to the ministry's statement, in just the past 24 hours alone, Israeli attacks killed 61 Palestinians and wounded another 220. Health authorities said 2 hospitals in Gaza City were forced to cease operations as Israeli ground offensives intensified in the northern part of the territory. A Gaza-bound aid flotilla said on Thursday that it is now less than 1,000 kilometers from the Palestinian enclave as it continues its bid to challenge Israel's long-running blockade. The flotilla's Maghreb branch declared in a post on Facebook they are only 995 kilometers away from Gaza. They sail with determination to break the siege. The update came a day after organizers reported 12 blasts across 9 vessels following drone harassment in international waters. The flotilla did not specify who was behind the attacks, while Israel, which has repeatedly warned it would block the mission. The representative of the Arab Lawyers Union aboard the mission, Abdelhak Ben Kadi, said the legal team is preparing to take the matter to the International Criminal Court, accusing Israel of war crimes at sea. The flotilla, made up of nearly 50 vessels carrying humanitarian supplies, including medical aid, is transporting more than 500 activists from around the world. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas pledged at the United Nations on Thursday to work with U.S. President Donald Trump, Saudi Arabia, France and the United Nations on a peace plan for Gaza, overwhelmingly backed by the world body.
نعلن استعدادنا للعمل مع الرئيس الأمريكي دونالد ترامب ومع المملكة العربية السعودية وفرنسا والأمم المتحدة وجميع الشركاء لتنفيذ خطة السلام التي أقرت في المؤتمر المنعقد في 22 سبتمبر الماضي بما يفتح الطريق نحو سلام عادل وتعاون إقليمي. ورغم كل ما عاناه شعبنا فإننا نرفض ما قامت به حركة حماس في 7 أكتوبر من أعمال استهدفت المدنيين الإسرائيليين وأخذهم رهائن، لأن هذه الأفعال لا تمثل الشعب الفلسطيني ولا نضاله العادل من أجل الحرية والاستقلال.
The 193-member UN General Assembly earlier this month overwhelmingly endorsed the 7-page declaration that aims to advance a 2-state solution for Israel and the Palestinians and end the war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas militants. The declaration emerged from an international conference at the UN in July, hosted by Saudi Arabia and France on the decades-long conflict. The United States and Israel boycotted the event and have rejected the international efforts. Houthi authorities said at least 8 people were killed and more than 140 injured after Israel launched a massive airstrike on Yemen's capital, Sana'a. Now, the attack, described as an inhumane act of retaliation, targeted residential areas, a detention center, a public infrastructure, further worsening the suffering of Yemenis long trapped in war. Houthi Health Ministry spokesperson Anis Al-Asbahi said the death toll is expected to rise as rescue operations continue beneath the rubble. Houthi media outlet Al Masirah reported that Israel also bombed residential neighborhoods and a power station. Meanwhile, Israel claimed the strikes targeted Houthi military facilities, but the statement was questioned as most of the targets were civilian sites, including a detention center holding non-combatants. The airstrike came just a day after the Houthis launched a drone attack on southern Israel that left more than 20 people injured. Israel had earlier vowed to escalate its attacks on Yemen. Coming up, a former French president sentenced to jail over Libya conspiracy. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy was sentenced to 5 years in jail on Thursday for criminal conspiracy over attempts to raise campaign funds from Libya, and will soon become the first former president of France to serve time in prison. The sentence was harsher than many expected and marked a spectacular downfall for Sarkozy, who was president from 2007 to 2012. He will spend time in jail even if he appeals the ruling, which he said he would do. As he exited the courtroom, Sarkozy, visibly moved, expressed his anger at what he said was a scandalous ruling, with his wife Carla Bruni by his side. Sarkozy was found guilty of criminal conspiracy over efforts by close aides to procure funds for his 2007 presidential bid from Libya during the rule of late dictator Muammar Gaddafi. He was acquitted by the Paris court of all other charges, including corruption and receiving illegal campaign financing. However, the prison sentence is enforceable immediately, and with the judge saying that Sarkozy would have just a short period to put his efforts or affairs in order before prosecutors call on him to head to jail. That should happen within a month. President Vladimir Putin on Thursday formally opened the International Forum World Atomic Week on Moscow. The annual forum is dedicated to the global nuclear industry and related fields. International Nuclear Watchdog Agency IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi, as well as Chairman of the State Administration Council of Myanmar, Man Aung Hlaing, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan were among foreign guests attending the event. Now, before the formal plenary session on Thursday, Chief of Russia's State Nuclear Cooperation, Rosatom Alexei Linkchev, led a tour of the Atom Museum for the invited leaders and IAEA's Grossi. The museum is dedicated to the history of Russia's nuclear energy program. The World Atomic Week event runs from September 25th until September 28th and is held at the All-Russian Exhibition Center, VDNKH, in Moscow. Now, according to the Kremlin, after the plenary session, President Putin will hold a bilateral talks with heads of foreign delegations. Former FBI Director James Comey was indicted on criminal charges of false statements and obstruction on Thursday in an obscuration of President Donald Trump's campaign to seek retribution against people who have investigated and criticized him. Trump fired Comey in 2017, earlier in the Republican president's first term in office. He has since regularly assailed Comey's handling on the FBI investigation that detailed contacts between Russia's and Trump's 2016 campaign. Since Trump returned to office in January, his Justice Department has been examining Comey's 2020 testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee when he addressed Republicans' criticisms of the Russia investigation and denied that he had authorized the disclosure of sensitive information to the news media. The case against Comey, who served as FBI director from 2013 until 2017, marked the starkest example of the Trump administration using its law enforcement power against a prominent critic after the president promised retribution during his successful 2024 election campaign. Sean Diddy Combs arrived in court on Thursday for a hearing over his bid to set aside a jury's verdict, finding the hip-hop mogul guilty of prostitution charges, but clearing him of more serious counts of sex trafficking and racketeering. Combs, 55, faces up to 20 years in prison in July. Conviction stands. Now, if he had pleaded not guilty to all of the charges, which could have been landed him in a prison for life. Combs, the founder of Bad Boy Records, is credited with elevating hip-hop in American culture. He was arrested on sex trafficking charges on 16th September 2024 and has since been held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. At the hearing, prosecutors and defense lawyers will each be given 20 minutes to present their arguments. U.S. District Judge Arun Subramaniam asked lawyers for both sides to address whether Combs should have raised his First Amendment argument earlier. Combs is scheduled to be sentenced on 3rd October should Subramaniam uphold his conviction. In a court filing earlier this week, his lawyers suggested a 14-month sentence that would see him released soon, as he would be credited for the time he has already spent in jail. Prosecutors are due to file their own sentencing recommendation on 29th September. United States tech firm Cloud HQ will invest $4.8 billion in a project to build 6 data centers in Mexico's central Querétaro state over the coming years. Now, according to a company executive on Thursday, the investment would be used to fuel cloud computing and artificial intelligence. Now, speaking at a press conference with top government officials, Chief Operating Officer Keith Harney said Cloud HQ was seeking a long-term tenant lease before it proceeds with the construction of the site. Now, these would be fueled by a 900-megawatt private substation. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum starting up investment in data center is important for Mexico as it brings the country to the capacity to process data related to artificial intelligence and information technology. Data centers store the increasingly vast amounts of digital information kept and processed on the internet, but they require large amounts of constant power supply and cooling systems to stop their computer systems from overheating. Now, the site is expected to be ready by 2027, when it should provide 900 permanent jobs at the site. Now, German defense startup Helsing unveiled a new autonomous military drone on Thursday, joining a race to build remote piloted systems that can swarm into battle with other drones or team up with crewed jets to reshape the future of air combat. Unveiling a full-size inaugural module of a roughly 4-ton CA-1 Europa drone at a factory outside Munich, Helsing said it would stage a first flight in 2027 and become available for military operations within the following 4 years. Commenting on so-called drone walls in light of recent drone incursions on Denmark, Helsing's CEO or co-CEO Gunbert Scherf said the idea was very sensible. Scherf predicted that the most efficient way to fight hostile drones would be not to with any single product, but it will be a system of systems that is needed.
Very complex systems, fighter jets that are multi-role as in the past. We rather want to have many simpler, mission-specific and even attritable platforms that then work together intelligently in swarms.
Still to come in sports, UEFA to vote for Israeli suspension from European football competition. UEFA appears poised for an emergency vote on suspending Israel from European competition next week, with national federations scrambling to position themselves amid mounting political pressure following calls for action. Now, the brewing crisis intensified this week when United Nations experts called for Israel's suspension from international football amid the unfolding genocide in occupied Palestinian territory. Now, should UEFA vote to ban Israel, it would put the organization on a collision course with the government of the United States, co-host for the 2026 World Cup, which is vehemently against such a motion. Even though UEFA has the power to suspend Israel or its clubs from their competitions, it may not be able to stop them from competing in World Cup qualifiers, which fall under the ambit of global football body FIFA. FIFA did not respond for comment, while UEFA declined to comment. Israel's national team are set to face Norway and Italy, the top two teams in the World Cup qualifying group, next month. Now, in tennis, world number 1 Carlos Alcaraz overcame a foot injury scare to beat Argentina's Sebastian Baez 6-4, 6-2 on his Tokyo Open debut on Thursday, extending his sizzling run of form to reach the second round at the ATP 500 event. Now, the 22-year-old, who reclaimed a top spot after winning the U.S. Open earlier this month, called a medical timeout in the opening set after jarring his left foot while stretching for a return. After dropping serve for 2-2, Alcaraz stretched for a forehand and stumbled backward in clear discomfort before collapsing to the court, clutching his left leg and glancing anxiously to his team. While laying there, the world number 1 received on-court attention from the physio before moving to his chair, where his left ankle and heel were taped during a medical timeout. The Spaniard returned with heavy strapping but played through discomfort, breaking Baez to edge 5-4 ahead of before serving out the set. Now, after a brief rain suspension, Alcaraz eased past Baez without facing a break to close out the contest in an hour and a half. Now, the victory improved his season record of 63-7, having won 48 of his last 51 matches. Over in Beijing, Jannik Sinner eased into the China Open last 16 with a dominant straight sets win over Marin Cilic on Thursday. Now, the world number 2 needed just 81 minutes to overcome the Croatian veteran 6-2, 6-2. Competing for the first time since his U.S. Open final defeat to Carlos Alcaraz, with which he also ceded the number 1 spot in the ATP rankings, Sinner bounced back in emphatic fashion. The 24-year-old Italian, who triumphed on his Beijing debut in 2023 and reached last year's final, saved the only break point he faced upon return to the Chinese ATP 500 event. Up next for the 2023 champion in Beijing in French qualifier Terence Atman, who began his campaign by seeing off Chinese wildcard Xin Zhenzhang 6-4, 6-2. Sinner will aim to keep pace in his battle with rival Alcaraz for ATP year-end number 1 honors across the remaining months of the season. The trials, the Spaniard, who is competing in Tokyo, by 2,590 points in the ATP live race to Turin. Now, that wraps up World Today this time around. In our top story, U.S. acknowledges Malaysia's success in Cambodia Thai ceasefire. For business news updates, do join us tonight at 8:30 p.m. on TV1 or saluran Berita RTM. But till then, I'm Otto Othman, Malaysia Madani, Rakyat Disantuni.